Welcome to XYPN Radio, where your host Alan Moore brings you into a community of fee-only financial planners who want to profitably and successfully serve Gen X and Gen Y clients. If you're ready to get the knowledge you need from leaders in your field, learn from forward-thinking advisors, and take action on your own goals, XYPN Radio is the show for you. Here's your host.
Hello and welcome to this episode of XYPN Radio. I'm your host, Alan Moore, and I'm excited to have XYPN member Emlyn Miles Mattingly, founder of Gen Next Wealth in Central California, on the show today. Emlyn started his career in banking, starting out as a teller and working his way all the way up to branch manager. He decided he wanted to pursue a career in financial planning, so he transitioned over to Edward Jones and then later Principal Financial Group. He got introduced to this podcast, which started him down the road to launching his own firm in late 2017. Emlyn works with minority families, providing multi-generational planning. His client is typically the financial leader of the family, and they end up bringing in parents, kids, grandparents, and more. And Emlyn helps facilitate the money conversation that most families have never had. His business has been growing rapidly as he has around 70 clients just 15 months into running his business. Many of them are investment-only clients, and we talked about the challenge of selling financial planning to the clients that are only coming to him for investment management services. We closed out with his words of wisdom for newer firm owners, and you are not going to want to miss this part of the episode. Is bookkeeping a major pain point for you? If so, you're not alone. Many financial advisors hate bookkeeping, and guess what? They're often terrible at it too. Enter the Bean team at FA Bean Counters, powered by XY Planning Network. Their free chart of accounts template will help you tackle one of the most basic but often incorrectly done bookkeeping tasks. Visit fabeancounters.com/XYPNradio to download the template and learn how to set up your chart of accounts like a pro. You can find any of the additional resources that we mentioned during the episode at xyplanningnetwork.com/198. Also, be sure to go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to join our private group just for XYPN Radio listeners. It's the community of advisors we've all been looking for that's there to provide support when we need it the most. Best of all, it's free. I encourage you to check it out. Again, that's xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP. Without further ado, here's my interview with Emlyn. Hey, Emlyn, welcome to the show, man. Thanks so much for being on.
Thanks for having me.
So for listeners' benefit, can you give me just sort of a broad overview of you and your practice, where you're located, number of clients, what year you started, if you have a niche market, and then we'll dig into the details.
Okay. Overview of the firm, Gen Next Wealth. I'm located in Madera, California. That is the heart of California. So we're smack dab in the middle, about 20 miles north of Fresno for people that know where that's at. I have about, I'll say 60 clients that are investment only clients, and I have about 7 ongoing planning clients. Yeah, that's about the firm. Started in 2017. Yeah.
Okay,
What's
so
that?
2017, so coming up on 2 years then?
Yeah. Actually, at the end of 2017, so it was November 2017 is when the firm actually started, November 7th to be exact, and then joined XY in February of 18. And so, yeah, that's about it.
All right, so about a year and a half in. That's awesome. How do you have any specific niche market or clientele that you serve?
Yes, it's interesting that you say that. So my niche is my multi-generational minority families. Kind of an interesting niche. I always tell people, I didn't choose the niche chose me. So when I started looking at my book of clients, the book of business, all my clients were minority families, and I was working with the entire family. So I'd start maybe with either, the kids that were my age, and then they would refer me to their parents, or I would start with the parents and they would refer me to their kids. And then from there, the grandparents would try to do stuff for the grandkids. So now I'm taking care of the parents, the kids, the grandkids. And so I would basically be in the whole family.
Multi-generational planning is its own beast, if you will, just from an overall, lines of communication, keeping it clear who you're working for at any given time and that sort of thing. So I definitely want to dig into that. That's really cool. What percentage of those, you said about 70 relationships total, what percentage of those would be classified as a multi-generational family that you're working with?
I would say, I'm trying to think, I'd say at least 50% of those people are all family members. And it kind of happened like this. And so I just did a client event, and it was funny because one of my friends or one of my partners I was helping me with it. He said, man, everybody in this room is related. He's like, you better not make anybody mad. Didn't dawn on me, but that's kind of how it worked out. Like everybody knows everybody. And it was one of those things that I started saying, and I didn't really realize what I was saying. I would tell my clients, I said, if you go sit down at Thanksgiving dinner and everybody at the table doesn't know who I am, I didn't do a good job.
So they did a good job and went and told all their friends and
yeah,
family.
And so that's how it started. Yeah, it was kind of crazy.
Is that cultural? I mean, like getting people to talk about money, much less with a family member, is impossible. I mean, very few people want to say like, oh, I have a financial planner, because it feels so pompous and like, oh, you must be rich. So like, what do you think it is about your client base that's willing to have that conversation over Thanksgiving turkey?
I think it's cultural. So when I said it's multi-generational, it's minority families, right? And so typically there's going to be at least one person in the family that has achieved some measure of financial success. And so when this one person has done that, typically just coincidentally, that's been the leader in most families. So, because every family has a go-to person. And so when this go-to person says, this is the person I'm working with, you should talk to him, then that's how it starts. And so whether it was, and I think the interesting part was it wasn't always from the parents going down. Sometimes it was from the kids going up to the parents. And I think, their involvement in the parents' finances as you have aging parents was probably just as important as anything else that was going on, because the parents are now asking the kids, what do you think about this situation? And then they're like, well, this is the person that takes care of stuff for me. And then I would meet the parents, and then vice versa, where I'd start with the parents and then work my way down. So,
yeah. So in a way that you end up by sort of default working with the center of influence in the family, and then they're willing to talk. Again, is that a cultural thing that in your opinion, to have sort of that one person in the family that when they achieve success, they're sort of that financial go-to? Just because I don't hear that a lot from, usually they're like the one trying to hide their money from the other family members so they don't know. And so it's not awkward if one's achieving success, or it creates a lot of tension in the family when one is successful and the other's not.
Yeah, you know what? Maybe it is cultural. I never really thought about it because it's the only way that I've ever done business, so I haven't really, maybe it's cultural. I mean, most of my clients are minorities, whether they're, Black or Latino or Asian or whatever they are. So I can't speak to how each individual culture done it, but like maybe the culture that I've developed here, talking about making that simple connection between Thanksgiving dinner and the family, because that's when everybody's going to be together, and not knowing the depth of what that would create by saying, if everybody at the family table doesn't know who I am, I haven't done a good job. Maybe that has something to do with it. It's easy to conversate about, Thanksgiving is typically a time of celebration, a good time for a lot of people. And maybe that's a time when they're just saying, hey, maybe this is someone that you need to talk to.
Man, that's awesome. Like I said, I worked at a firm that tried to do a lot of multi-generational planning and just really struggled to get the stakeholders at the table and try to have those conversations. It was always a struggle. So that is awesome that you've been able to tap into that.
I'd say one thing that just to interject there, and I think what happens is we talk about it from I interject a lot of my own family things that have gone on, and making that important things that they like, making that connection for them as something of importance that they need to share with their family. I had my grandmother, she passed away a few years back, but we had some family things that happened, and I'll give you an example of one. So my grandmother had dementia, and she ended up passing away, but she had to go into long-term care. We had long-term care insurance, so she was able to go into a facility, and how all that transition happened and what it did for the family and what we had to do with the house and all this stuff. So I bring those types of things into the conversation with the clients and saying, okay, we had this prepared, but I've seen it where that's not been prepared. Like, people aren't prepared for something like that to happen. And then how does that affect the family? I said, you've seen a lot of families split up over not, understanding how they're going to separate these assets, or if they even, you've seen a lot of fights that break out in that. So to prevent that, how do we do? Is that something that you want to have happen in your family? And they're like, well, no, I don't want that to happen. And so it's almost like wow, then this is something we need to talk about. And so that's kind of how I present it with, as life things happen to me in our family, I would share those things with my clients. And that's kind of, I think, how it all started.
Yeah, it connects it and makes it relatable because, sometimes you're not sure the situation, but when you can sort of outline that particular very real life instance, obviously connects it for the client, which is awesome. So talk to me a little bit about your career path and how you got into financial planning. Was this the career you always thought you'd be in?
No, I didn't know what I was going to do. It kind of just happened. So I started in banking. I was in banking for a long time. Started as a teller, and then from there went into new accounts, and then became a branch manager. And I remember when I was going through my career in banking, I always seen the financial advisor. He'd come to the office. He was always he never got there when we opened. He'd always show up about 10 o'clock. He'd always leave about 3 o'clock. He drove the nicest car. And apparently it seemed like he was making more money than everybody else, and no one told him what to do. And I was like, I want that. At 22 years old, I was like, I want to do that. From there, working at the bank, before I went into management, this is about 2007, they promoted me, but there was 2 career paths where either I could go into the financial advisor track or go into the management track. Well, in 2007, right before the market crashed, they discontinued that program when I was working at Citibank. And so I was going to go into the Smith Barney Junior FA program, but that didn't work out. But it was time for me to promote, so I went into management. From there, I worked at Citibank for a little while. Then I went to Ed Jones for 6 months, and that was a unique experience. And so after that, I ended up at Principal for about 5 years before I started my own firm in 2017. Principal, it was great. I had fun there. It was a different experience from anything else that I had done up until that point, but it was good.
So you've really worked at a cross section of the industry. So, true banking, from teller up, Edward Jones and Principal Financial Group, which are sort of 2 different, scenarios as well. And then now as a fee only RIA. So how would you describe the differences for listeners that are trying to decide on career path, especially our younger listeners that, they're looking for a job, and the people who hire the most folks are the Edward Joneses and the Principal Financial Groups out there. How would you explain sort of life in those firms and what makes them different from, the RIA world you live in now?
With Edward Jones, it was, I just really looked at it like Wolf of Wall Street, like you're knocking on doors, you're trying to, basically, you're knocking on doors, trying to get as many names as you can, and then you get back to the office, and then you're trying to pitch them a stock. That's kind of how it started, and that was just, you really are, kind of stockbroker-like. There wasn't a lot of planning there, not at least when I was there, and this is, 7 years ago, and it was really just about sales. And I'm not saying that was wrong or that was bad. It was just the experience that I had while I was there. So, they had a great training program, and I'm not scared to sell anybody anything. So they gave me a good foundation on sales training. From there, going to Principal, it was, there's so many resources that you have at a large company like that. And like, there was a lot of training when I first got in, still sales, but insurance focused. So in Edward Jones, we didn't even talk about insurance. At Principal, the first couple of years there was focusing just on insurance. And so sold a lot of disability, a lot of life insurance, long-term care, did a lot of that stuff. And then about my second year there, after, going in to start at zero from all the insurance sales, I was like, I have to do something different. So then I started getting into manage money and doing a little some fee-based accounts. I think like overall the experience from both of those really prepared me to go independent and have my own RIA. And so if you're looking for something, like it's kind of tough because it's not what I do now. But the experience that I had from working at those places prepared me to do what I do now.
Yeah, it's great to hear just what the experiences because, Edward Jones, they're pretty much the last or only company I'm aware of that still does door to door. But that's what you do. That's the job is you go door to door, knocking on doors and talking to people about their money. And while that, I can think of few jobs I would rather do less than that one. That just sounds horrible. Talk about amazing sales training opportunity. I mean, because you get a lot of at-bats. You really learn how to quickly establish rapport with someone, ask good questions to get them talking about themselves, how to be able to then connect that back to the service you're offering. I mean, the only way to learn to do that is to do it. So I'm assuming that side was probably wildly valuable, especially now that you're running your own business and responsible for all the business development.
Yes, the training was great, and then like you said, the at bats, you're not scared of anything. Like I'm not scared to ask someone for business or just have a conversation with someone after you can't. And then I think that the part that I'm not talking about is the transition, right? From going from being a bank manager, and everybody always wants to go talk to the manager, and then showing up and knocking on someone's doors after that. And sometimes running into some of my clients that I had at the bank, and they're like, "What are you doing knocking on my door?" That was like one of it was humbling, to say the least, like just to go to someone's door after being, because for a long time, bank managers were like pillar in the community. And now I'm knocking at your door trying to sell you, some Pepsi stock. It was just crazy.
So what drove the decision to move away from the bank to Edward Jones? Because I mean, as a branch manager, that seems like you're rocking and rolling in terms of a banking career, and then to transition over to advisor, was that just the path you saw to become the guy that could show up at 10 and leave at 3, or was there more to it than that?
It was just that I thought it was what I've always wanted to do. I didn't know exactly, even working in the bank, I wasn't exactly sure what a financial advisor did, but it was just something that I wanted to try. And it wasn't so much so I could, leave at 10, get there at 10 and leave at 3. It was just, it's something intrigued me about it. And after I get something stuck in my mind, I have to, there was only one way to scratch that itch, is to go do it. And so that's how I got to Edward Jones.
Okay. So what drove the decision then to move from Edward Jones over to Principal?
I felt like I was just doing investments, and I wasn't really I just felt like people needed more than that. Like, so when I'm talking to people, like when I worked at Citibank, I was already selling insurance. I'd seen how insurance had worked in my own family already. And I was like, well, this is an important part of the puzzle. People need to have insurance. I mean, it's important to do their investments, but a lot of the people that I want to talk to aren't necessarily going to have money to invest with Edward Jones. And so I'm going to need to do something that I can help them with. And that was insurance. And so then when the opportunity came to work with Principal, I was like, okay, so I get to do insurance and investments here. Let's do that.
So what did you discover in terms of being at, Principal with the level of planning that they do? I mean, was it what you were expecting and a really good education in terms of learning how to do planning?
Somewhat. So they were starting to do more planning. We had some proprietary software that we would do for planning when I was working there. Prior to them, like right before I left, they were using Money Guide Pro. So everything was based on a plan. It was, but it was based on a plan to lead you to sell product. But you would talk about, very specific things. So we would talk about estate planning. We would talk about their life insurance, we would do risk management. We would talk about all the areas of a financial plan, but spending a lot more time speaking about insurance. So it did give me more of a holistic approach or view of what a holistic approach could be like working at Principal. So they did try to do more planning, but it was always focused on, getting to the insurance. And the other thing that they did at Principal was, because they're such a big retirement plan company, I got to get into a little more details about how 401ks work and, defined benefit, defined contribution plans and how those work, which we had tons of resources for that. So that was definitely a plus working there. So I could talk to people about those things and working with business owners too. So
what ultimately drove the decision to go launch your own firm? I guess when did that idea start germinating and what ultimately led to it?
You know what? You're probably gonna laugh at this. So I'd always wanted, I was like, okay, I want to do something on my own. I'm not sure how I'm going to do it, but I do want to do something. And so one day I was at the office at Principal. My buddy, I told him, he's one of the guys that I met when I first started working there, Paul. So when we were, there was this podcast that he was listening to. He's always raving about it. And it was this podcast. And so he's like, hey, you need to listen to this podcast. And I was like, well, what is it? I hadn't even listened to a podcast since then I've, grown my list of podcasts I listen to, but he's like, you need to listen to this. And so I had a 30-minute drive every day to work. And so he tells me about the XY podcast. And so I started listening to it. And then I started hearing stories of people that were in similar situations to me that were actually able to start their own firm. And I was like, well, maybe it's not as hard as I thought it was. As many guests have said, I listened to Sophia Berra early on, and I was like, that's all. It's only going to cost that much, which, ended up costing a little more than what I thought it was, but I was prepared for that. But yeah, that was kind of the catalyst that started. And so I listened to the podcast for a couple of years, and then it was like, it's time.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That's awesome. We, I'll admit, when we launched the podcast, I had zero idea that it would have the type of reach that it's had to folks that did not, that had never met, and was able to share these stories and hopefully an honest story. We get a lot of pushback around Sophia's original article and have tried to clarify that not everyone starts a business for $10,000, but you can. That does not include personal expenses, but we find some people, spend $10,000, some people spend more, but ultimately that it is a possibility, right? It's opening the doors in terms of making it a possibility that a lot of folks didn't realize was one. Trying to work through how to best do that for themselves and build a business that works for them.
Yeah, it was definitely what it did is it opened my eyes, and then it made me start doing more research. So now I started looking, okay, what's the first thing I need to do? How much is it going to cost to do a website? What type of business formation do I need to have? What do I, so I started looking into those questions, and it gave me like a baseline of what. And so now when I'm going through and, I would look at like the stuff the money she spent on technology. So I did everything in threes. So when I looked at CRMs, I went to 3 CRMs. When I went to this, I picked, 3 web designers. When I went to this, I picked 3, and I just went through. And before you know it, it was like, oh, wow, and I come home, and I was talking to my fiance at the time, and I'm telling her all this stuff. And she's like, okay, so she's listened to all the podcasts too. She's been, hostage in the car with me. So it's like, oh, yes, listen to this one. And so, after listening to all these, she was like, so what are you going to do now? And I was like, she was like, yeah, you have all this information. Are you going to start something, or what's going to happen? I was like, I think it's time.
All right. Well, maybe that's people ask me, how do I get my partner on board with me starting a firm? And the answer is just annoy them with my voice for almost 200 hours, and you'll be fine.
Yeah. They'll break.
So you make the decision to launch a firm. So you said November of 2017. And what was the sort of transition period like for you? Was it, basically once you told principal, did you get walked to the door? Did you have some sort of transition time?
That's an interesting story. I'll give you a little piece of that story. I won't get all into that. So basically this is what happened. So I had been looking into business formation. For me, that was important. I wanted to make sure I got structured right. So I set up a meeting with some friends of mine. I had an attorney, a CPA, and I was like, this is what I want to do. I want to open my own RA. So they give me what I should do. So then I find a company to start that process. So I started that. Gosh, I want to say maybe June of 2017. So finally get all that stuff figured out in August. Now, meanwhile, what I didn't say, and I guess I don't know, I guess it's just the way that our generation does things. So in that time, my wife and I are planning a wedding in 2017. Or my fiance at the time. So we're going to get married in September, and I'm doing all this. So the business gets formed in August. We get married in September. I have an assistant at principal that's working for me that knows I'm planning on leaving. And so I go on my bachelor party, and when I come back, it's like a week before the wedding, my assistant is starting to look for work from other advisors in the office, and they want to know why is she going to need more work. So they kind of found out, they found out before I was trying to tell them. And so that made the transition a little faster than it needed to be. But, it is what it is. The business, they have to, principal as a company has to take care of their business. But yeah, I got an email from my director, and he says, hey, I heard some things. And I was like, oh man, that's not good. So we talked, and I apologized because they had treated me up until that point. They had treated me really well. There was, I didn't want it to end that way, but it was kind of like, okay, you got a week, you got to get your stuff. And that was that.
Well, hey, you go on the honeymoon and do not have to worry about tying into work. That's a nice bonus.
Yeah. So we get back, and so 2017, I leave one firm, we start another firm, we get married, and then we got pregnant all in like 3 months.
What is it about guests on this show that just like do everything at once? And I'm guilty of it as well. So I can't say too much, but still it's like, yeah, go easy on yourself.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know what we were thinking, but it just all happened. And I once again, like most of your guests that are on here, I'll say I wouldn't recommend it, but I don't know if I could have done it any other way.
When you were going to start your own firm, then obviously things got accelerated. Did you have a book of business you were able to transfer with you, or did Principal retain ownership of those clients?
So Principal had ownership of a lot of the clients. I mean, not ownership, but they, so when I leave abruptly like that, I didn't, I kind of told some of my clients that I was planning on leaving, like, my larger clients. But I wasn't able to do the transition the way I wanted to. So the people, I was able to get some of the names on my CRM, and there was a handful of clients that I was able to bring and start with. But yeah, it was because it happened like, in a week when I was in the middle of getting married, I was able to bring some, not as many as I thought I would bring.
Yeah, so obviously limited on what you can do. Did you pay much attention to that? Because you'd worked in a couple of instances, being at the bank and then Edward Jones. This wasn't your first job. Did you pay much attention to the paperwork you were signing when you came on board at Principal Financial? Or did you just sort of like sign whatever they put in front of you and review it when you were on your way out?
I mean, I signed whatever they put in front of me. As I started thinking about, making the transition, I was like, wait, what? Hold on. Do I have a no compete? Are these my clients? Are they their clients? Do I get to keep the information? So it was after the fact that I started thinking that. But yeah, when I was, when I'm getting into when I started there, it was just like, oh yeah, great. I'm starting here. I just sign it and figure it out later.
Yeah. And that's one of the recommendations. I've never been in a situation where I was signing a bunch of paperwork either. So, or actually read it, but that is, know what you sign, because it will certainly change the how you can exit, right? Because if you don't sign a non-compete and you have all of the client relationships, you can take them with you, but consult an attorney. Let's just say that.
Yeah, there was no non-compete there. I don't think, because you don't have anything when you start. Principal's one of those. It's not like they gave me a book of business. Like when you first start, you come and you don't have anything. So most of the people that I brought in were people that I knew anyways. And so, they may give you some house accounts later, which they did give me some house accounts. And quite frankly, most of the house accounts, all of the house accounts stayed, I think.
Sure. Yeah. They just a different model when they're house accounts. So how many clients? So you're about 18 months in. You said you didn't bring a lot of clients with you. So you have brought on a lot of clients in the first 16, 17 months of being in business.
Yeah. So I would say I probably brought 30 clients with me. And then a lot of those small investment only clients, like people, just because I'm in town and there's like, I'm in a small town, there's like 70,000 people here. And there's me and an Edward Jones guy here. So there's no one else kind of here. But I was able to bring over about $5 million in assets from the 30 or so clients that I brought with me. And so that gave me a good base. So in that first 3 months, I'd probably say I brought over by the time I got into April, I'd already brought over about a little under like $4.7 million.
So, but I mean, still, you've been onboarding clients like crazy. You said, you're starting somewhere around 30 clients. You're up to 70 now. I mean, that's 3 a month. I mean, you're pushing 1 a week. I guess let's start at the beginning. So you go to leave. How was the conversation with your existing clients? How did you communicate to them that this was the direction you wanted to go?
What happened was I was thinking I had started a DBA while I was at Principal. So I was already trying to, brand myself and not brand them. So when I started my DBA, I would talk to them. I was like, I'm thinking about starting something in Madera, and what do you think about that? And they're like, well, yeah, we like you, Emlyn. We if you're in Madera, that'd make it easier for us. And I was like, well, but I might leave Principal. They're like, well, we do business with you, and hearing that from your client, like getting the feedback from the client saying that you're our guy, like wherever you go, we're going, like really gave me the courage to make that decision to finally take that leap. Fun story about the leap, though, because I was planning on, I'd been listening to the XY podcast, so I was going to do everything virtual, I had an office in my house. I was going to be, that's how everything was going to go. I had a conversation with one of my clients. One of my clients that because my clients like I told you, like they become like family. Like I'm invited to retirement parties. I know their grandkids. I know their I know everybody. So during the transition, I talked to one of my clients and I was like, hey, okay, so I left. I've officially gone from there. Start moving over assets. We're working with TD Ameritrade. Blah blah blah. And I said, hey, I can come by the house and sign your paperwork and we can start the transition. He was like, oh, well, we're in the middle of doing a remodel. And I was like, oh, okay. So then let's just grab something to eat. We'll meet at a restaurant. And then he says, my wife and I would rather not do business with, mixed business and meals. And I was like, okay. And he tells me, he says, Emlyn, it'd be really nice if you had an office for us to go to. That would make my wife and I feel a lot better. And I was like, that wasn't in the budget. That's what I'm thinking. I was like, when I was looking at Sophia's plan, it didn't say anything about an office space. So what are we going to do? And so at this point in time, I really just, I sat back and I really prayed and I said, God, you said that this was going to work out. I need your help. And I got off the phone with my client and I said that. And then I said, so I'm just going to go somewhere here in town and find some direction. I literally walked into my house, went to a real estate office, started talking to some people in the office, and they said, go check at this place. The first place I came is where I'm sitting at now. Walked in, they said, we'll do a month-to-month lease for you. The price was great. And that's how I got my office. And I didn't have any furniture, but I did have a location, and that's what he said he wanted. So I had my first meeting in my office. I called my client. I said, hey, we can meet on Tuesday. I don't have any furniture yet. We're still working on it. I had a Costco table and I got, Costco table and chairs. And he goes, yeah, that's fine. You got a place? Let's do it. So my first meeting here with my client was on a Costco table with some chairs, and he signed over his transfer paperwork and started, he was my first client.
I love it. I mean, you got to be flexible, right? And decisions that you make, you got to know that they're fluid and you may have to switch. You got to know which decisions you're okay with being fluid and which ones aren't. There are some people out there that would say, no, I'm not going to have an office and that's not an option for me. It was for you and that's totally fine. There's no right answer there. You just have to be sure you're doing what works for you. But for folks that are thinking about office space or thinking like, oh man, does that mean I got to get an office? Understand that there's some flexibility there. It's not just go sign a 5-year lease on a big expensive office. It could be a WeWork or a Regus if you want to be able to keep costs low. I used to rent out a room from an estate lawyer in town that had a room for, $400 a month, and it included all the utilities and the internet, which was awesome. And, occasional use of the conference room. You can be flexible in terms of, your space and where you're at and what all you need. So don't feel like you got to lock yourself into $1,000 a month lease or anything like that. It can be done cost effectively, but, you may have to do a little hunting.
Yeah, I lucked out. This place that I'm at is a block from my house. So not only is it, and I'm renting an office, like there's we didn't have like a WeWork, but I'm renting just an office inside of a larger office. Yeah, I couldn't. Yeah, it was crazy how convenient this was, and I guess everything works out. If it's meant to be, it'll work out.
That's it. So you go get the office, start taking on clients. You onboard that first wave of clients, and then what did you start doing in order to get the word out that you had started? Because again, you've seen a lot of success here. So what have you learned that is effective in terms of getting the word out that you're in business and bringing on new clients that quickly?
Yeah. So basically, what I did was kind of what I'd been doing. I'd built a business. I'd built a brand at Principal of being, this financial advisor. And so what I did was I went to my social medias, and that's where I started at. And, after I got, everything set up here at the office, then I went to the local chamber here, which I'm on the board for. And we did a ribbon cutting, posted some, just videos on Instagram and Facebook. And then just talking to people around town and just basically that, like the Facebook and Instagram has probably been the biggest thing for me in way of Facebook, Instagram, and referrals. I would probably say referrals first because I've always been pretty good at getting referrals, and I've heard, several things about that, the good, the bad, and the different. But I've gotten most of my business came from referrals from other family members. So once again, it grew like kind of organically in my book. As they knew I was here, they would send people to me, or people would reach out to me. And that's kind of how it started. And then from there, it was increasing, traffic to my social media, which I always try to focus around the area that I'm in. And so between those two things, like I'd post something and then someone would, send me a message like, hey, don't you do this? I need to come see you. Or, hey, my friend said something about you. And that's how I got a lot of word of mouth business. And I hope that explains it all right.
Yeah, just looking for strategies that other advisors can implement. Instagram's an interesting one. I am not a real visual person, so Instagram has not been in like Pinterest. Those haven't been platforms that I've leveraged, and I hear some success with it, and others say no. So what are you finding is successful? I mean, I guess I can pull up your Instagram page here. Are you sharing just sort of life in general? Is it money focused? Is it, company brand versus your own personal family focus? Like,
I do all of it. So I do it from my personal page. I know some people do a business page. It's me, so you're going to get, you'll get pictures of my son. You're going to get pictures of my daughters. You see stuff of my wife. You'll see some motivational stuff on there sometimes. It's just me, and I just try to document what I'm doing, and documenting is probably the best thing I could say that worked for me. Like as I'm making I did some videos with another entrepreneur here in town. That's been well received, but just, and then when I put, pictures of my kids, those are, people love seeing that. So it's just being real. I think the biggest part of social media on whatever platform you is, because there's different ways to use the platforms, but being able to create that relationship with them without anyone ever knowing you, without them, they didn't formally meet me and shake my hand, but there's people that can, oh yeah, you just had a baby. Oh yeah, you guys just got married. Oh yeah, weren't you over here the other day? And so they know what's going on in my life and kind of just opening that up to people. And then, oh yeah, by the way, don't you do some financial stuff? What do you do? And those questions come up, and then sometimes I'll do posts about that. But that's pretty much what it's been, just kind of documenting.
That's awesome. Like I said, it's not my preferred medium, and that's what makes it great, is because it is yours, both how you share and consume content. And so that, my encouragement for advisors is find the thing that works for you. You probably heard me say this on the podcast before, but I'm not a good writer. I don't, video is pretty intense. So doing video editing and that sort of thing is pretty intense. But, podcasting was the medium that I found that I enjoyed, that I could keep up with. And so you just have to find the thing that works for you. You have to be authentic. You can't force it. If I get on Instagram and try to be an Instagram marketer, it just won't work. No one cares what I'm going to be sharing. And so, yeah, just focus on what's working for you and what works for your target market, and go all in on it. So what are some of the other areas? I mean, it sounds like Instagram, Facebook have been powerful platforms for you, just getting out in the community. I mean, I guess, it sounds like just so much business is coming your way at this point. I mean, you're out there hustling. So I'm just trying to figure out sort of what are the tips and tricks that you have for other advisors, in terms of what is working for you?
Just telling your story. Like, I think that sometimes we try to get, we want to be so polished in what we're doing and think that people won't forgive us for making mistakes. Like I record videos and sometimes I say stuff, it doesn't sound right or whatever. And the video that I think that I posted that I was the best one ever gets no views. And the ones where I, stumbled over my words and stuttered and did that, people like those the best, because I think in people want authenticity. So just be yourself. And however you're going to communicate with people, whether it's a blog post, whether it's a video, whether it's however you feel comfortable communicating, just be authentic, and people will see your authenticity. And if you do have a target market that you're dealing with, they probably are people that that may follow you already. And if they're not, then, adjust your content to speak to them.
So you mentioned obviously that you do a lot of multi-generational planning work. Talk to me about that process. Is that simply like, I meet with the grandparents, I meet with the parents, I meet with the kids, or are you doing meetings with different levels of the family together? How do you do and sort of implement that level of planning?
Yeah. So what happens is I typically meet with one of the family members, and then from there I ask questions, and then asking questions about how the family, who's basically the person in the family that makes most of the decisions. And usually I'm dealing with that person. And then what will happen is they will ask questions And so I'll ask them, what happens to you? Usually I get around the estate planning stuff, and it's like, okay, if something happens to you, what do you want to have happen to, this or that? And it's basically from the risk management perspective. When I'm doing that, because of the insurance background that I have, I'll talk to them a lot about that. And then from there, they're like, well, I think the biggest thing that I'm getting is people are saying, you need to talk to this person in my family. You need to talk to this person. And so it's like, oh, okay, well, yeah, I'll talk to them. I haven't had I tried to do the family meetings before where I have like, let's do a family meeting. Do you guys have like a place where you go? Like I know one family in particular I'm thinking about, they always go up to Bass Lake, which is a lake that's a couple miles from here. And then they go to the cabin, and I'm like, that would be a perfect time for us to talk about, your estate plan, like what's going to happen with all of this. Those meetings have been harder to get scheduled, but that's where I want the practice to go, where we can actually have those kind of meetings and get into some real in-depth conversations about what's going on with the finances. And I say that in the minority with my clients, because most of them are minorities, and I don't know a lot of them that had trust, that had wills, that had any planning. So I'm taking someone that may have never even had a financial advisor and trying to get them to think about planning for their family's future when they're just the first generation that's ever planned for their own family. So it's a tough thing to do, but I like the direction that things are going with the firm right now.
Yeah, and I've been in the room for a couple of those family meetings, and those are tough to navigate, man. I mean, you take the topic of money, which is hard enough, and then you overlay all the family dynamics and what dad said to one of the kids when they were 12 comes up. I mean, like that is a tough conversation. So have you found any formal training or anything like that to sort of help navigate this, or are you sort of learning as you go?
I'm learning as I go. Like I use like what I've done a lot of is I use a lot of those Kinder questions in what I'm doing, and using those Kinder questions when I'm talking to clients really kind of breaks down like, they're mad about, dad may have said to this person. But then when I ask them, I say, if you had 10 years, 5 to 10 years left to live, what regrets do you have? And what's going to come up? Me fighting with dad over, that popsicle that we had back when I was 10 years old, and we haven't really had the same relationship then. And they're in my office and they're crying now. And it's like, well, what are you going to do to fix that?
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, it's amazing work. Like I said, it's tough, and you got to really want it. That's not work you're going to do well if you're just sort of half-assing it and just like not really sure if you want to be in the room for that. You got to really want it and see the power in it. But that's an awesome niche and skill set to have.
Yeah, so it's worked out, and I think just because of the passion that I have working in that minority community and wanting to be able to help them build a legacy is just where I was passionate about. And it's a tough thing to do. I know we haven't talked about, I mean, I've seen the stuff that we have with the diversity committee here with XY and stuff going on in the industry. There's been a lot of talk about what's going on in the industry as far as trying to increase diversity, having more POC in the industry. So I think that as the industry is going to have their push for that, we have to be able to be prepared to work with these kind of families to help them be prepared for the new people that are going to come into the industry that look like them.
Yeah, it is such a topic of conversation, as it should be. The numbers are astoundingly terrible whenever you look at, percentage of CFPs that are non-white, percentage of CFPs that are female. I mean, it just across the board, like this is a white man's game and it shouldn't be, because, all Americans deserve to have access to financial planning, and, all Americans at all income levels pretty much can pay and are willing to pay for financial planning. We need a service model that works for them. And we also have to be out there. It's multifaceted. It's both having a service model. It's being able to tell young people that this industry exists, and giving them, mentors that look like them, that it's not just, old white guys, which, there's going to be plenty of us out there, but we can't be the only ones here. And also educating clients that this exists. I know culturally speaking that's another big issue that certain client populations have been taken advantage of for a long time. And so, trying to get past the past damage that has been done. Do you have any words of wisdom or recommendations or thoughts around, we talk a lot about that there's a problem, but everyone's still searching for how to fix the problem.
Yeah. And I think that it's not only a problem that I've seen it a lot. Just so put me at, and I'll just talk a little bit about this, and then I'll if it's okay. But I wanted to get this in there. But so working at Principal, I remember them having an initiative to make sure that they wanted to be more diverse. And I remember, every time we had a person of color come in, I was like because you're saying, how do we fix it, right? And so I was the person that they were supposed to come talk to. I'm the only Black guy that worked there at the time. And so it was interesting because all these people would come in and I'm like the beacon of hope, I guess, for what they could be. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm not trying to be the token Black guy to help everybody else. I'm trying to build a business. And I understand that we want to get more people in the industry, but that's your job. My job is to build my book of business. And that kind of sounds tough, but I'm not sitting here saying that I'm not going to help these people. But it's hard to be the poster face person for everybody that's Black that's going to come in, or Latino that's going to come in, and then try to run the business as well, because it's a tough situation. And in itself, being the only, walking into rooms and being the only Black guy in the room and walking into meetings and being the only Black person there, it's a tough thing already. And now I'm supposed to be like the leader for everyone else that's not white in the office, for me to help all of them. So and I don't think I've never heard anyone talk about that really on the podcast. So I wanted to talk to that a little bit and say, like, yeah, I want to help everyone. And there's no better feeling like than being able to see other people that look like you in the room. But I can't be responsible for their success or failure in the business. It's already hard enough in the business on its own. And now you're trying to make me be the person that makes all them successful. And it's hard.
I appreciate you sharing that. I remember Brian Thompson, I think 2 years ago, he was part of our one of our first diversity panels at a conference. And he said the same thing. He said, like, I don't want to be the token Black guy. Like, stop making me the one guy that you come ask the question to of, like, how do we get more, Black people into financial planning? And could you be, 37 people's mentor because you're the only guy we know? And it is a great point that we all need to be diligent in terms of being sure we're engaging people that want to engage. And being Black does not mean that you have to care about bringing in more people of color into financial planning. Like, you don't have to care. That's up to you, and whether or not it's a priority or not. And there's no right or wrong there. And there's certainly an assumption that you would care. And it's a good reminder.
Don't get me wrong. I do care. That is what I want. I want to go to a conference and see, other Black people that are doing this. And I've connected with a lot of the Black people here in XY. But what I'm saying is it puts us in it's already hard enough for us to be able to deal with everything we have to deal with being the only Black. Like, I remember being a part of the estate planning council and I'm the only Black guy there. Like, it's already, that's its own challenge. And yes, do I want another one to come in? Yes, yeah, absolutely. I want as many people of color to come into the industry as we can, because I think it's going to change the way that things are done. But I can't be the leader for everybody.
You got a business to build. Like you said, like you got to balance that. You've got a business and you've got a family and also this as a priority and balancing it all. So it's a great point. I appreciate you bringing that up.
So, but yeah, I mean, I think that, the industry is going to make I like what the CFP is doing with the campaign, trying to put people out there. I'm actually in the middle of studying for my CFP now, because I think it's my duty to get my CFP if I'm going to be in this industry and be, being Black in the industry. I have to have that. Like, it's just, and I talk to, most of any of my peers that are Black in the industry that about getting their designation. Like, I'm like, we have to do that. We owe it to ourselves. We owe it to our community, so that we just owe it to ourselves to be more educated in the subject of financial planning.
Switching gears a little bit, what are some of the big things that you're working on right now? Because, like I said, you've experienced awesome growth, and what are some of the big things you're looking at doing in your business as you continue to move forward to be able to accomplish your goals?
One thing I'm thinking about right now is working on trying to get a podcast going. So I want to start a podcast. I've met with a few other people that I know that are doing podcasts. I see some of the members in the community that are doing some great work with their podcasts. And I'm like, you know what? I think that's a good way to get the word out, not only for clients, but also for people that potentially want to get in the business. And I think this gives me the medium to deliver that message. So working on a podcast, and then just trying to grow the business that way. And then looking for some more, like trying to do some more public speaking engagements. I spoke with some other members in the XY community about doing more public speaking, because I might not be able to mentor someone one-on-one, but if I can put a podcast out there and have other people that are going to be able to help bring awareness to financial issues that are in minority families, then that would be I think that'd be a great way to do it. And then also with the public speaking. So those are two things that I'm working on right now, that I'm super excited about, and that I think are going to be that should really help business, but also help get the message out.
Okay. One thing I was going to ask you about was, earlier in the episode, you mentioned that the number of investment-only clients you have, the number of planning clients that you have. And I'm just curious if you're seeing, sort of for your business, are you transitioning into doing more ongoing planning? Or I guess, how does that break down for you, and sort of what the future holds for the business and what you're focused on?
So I'm trying to make it more planning focused with investments as, an addition. And that's been a tough transition for me. I was talking to someone the other day about this, but because I've come from, Edward Jones principal, and then starting this. So it's been investments and insurance basically is what I've always done. And so now to try to transition that mentally, to wrap my head around how to get more planning clients, because I'll have meetings where I'll have a client come in and I'll present what I'm doing on the planning side. And they're like, we'll just do investments. And I'm like, but you need planning. I know you need planning because I just looked at your situation. So being able to articulate that, that they need the plan, or how to articulate their need for planning better.
Yeah, and which is tough to sell, and I've seen that transition play out, and just the challenge of changing the way you're selling and what you're selling to, more of an ongoing service, relationship service on the financial planning side. It's just different, and it just takes getting used to transitioning that. But and also who's coming to you. If you got a lot of investment only clients that are referring you new clients, they're probably talking about your investment service. They're not necessarily talking about the financial planning service.
Yeah, and that's been kind of tough, but on the flip side of that, a lot of those younger clients that are coming to me that I feel need planning, that's where I've been able to go into my book of business and say, hey, you know what, let's, we do our annual review. And it's like, hey, I'll send them I have a annual review questionnaire, and it'll ask them about their overall financial, like how they feel about their overall financial situation. And so it'll give me an opportunity to talk about that, because they'll tell me, scale of 1 to 10, what do you think? And if they're, a 5, then it's like, okay, this is someone that sees the need. They just don't know what I do. There's like I'm the only fee-only planner in my city, and I think there's only a few in like the surrounding areas. There's not very many.
So as we're sort of coming to a close, you've had a lot of success here in the first year. Things are rocking and rolling, and you've had a pretty, again, like this cool cross-sectional career throughout financial services. You've really seen it all, which I assume has really helped contribute to the success that you've experienced in starting your business. If you look back and think about the one thing that you wish you could go back and tell your younger self, that one thing you've learned that you wish you could go back and learn earlier, what do you think that one piece of advice would be?
The one piece of advice, it would be, because of all the experience that I've had, understanding that I had all the information, or believing in yourself. And for a long time, I struggled with that, right? Like, it's like, okay, so, I've all the areas of financial planning that I talk to clients about are areas that I've actually worked in. Like when it comes to mortgages, I've worked in mortgage. Like I did that. When it comes to life insurance, I've sold life insurance. When it comes to investments, I had done that. And believing in myself, the self-belief was a big deal. So believe that you're able to, believe in yourself, and then it's okay to make mistakes. Like you're not going to be perfect. And those were the two things that really I struggled with, like before I made that jump into starting the firm. So I would say, self-belief, because preparation being prepared is the biggest thing. But I had done all the preparation. So then taking that step out and saying, okay, now that I've prepared for this, let's go do it, and having confidence enough to do it.
That's awesome, man. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show, share your career path and your story and the wisdom you've gained. I really do appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. And the other thing that I was going to tell you was just don't compare. I forgot to say it, but it was don't compare your start with someone else's middle. Because every time, and there's so many great guests that you have on this podcast and other things that people read or wherever. And I found myself doing that a lot, comparing my beginning to someone else's middle. And once I stopped doing that, it changed me. So don't compare your beginning to someone else's middle.
Dude, I love that so much, because it is something that absolutely happens. Because by the time folks come on the podcast, they're through the, oh crap, what did I do phase? That first year to 18 months is tough. And we try to have folks in, sort of scattered on the podcast that are in that phase as well. But yeah, you can't come out of the gate, exactly where someone is 5 years in. It's the same way we didn't come out of college making as much money as our parents made. In a middle class household, it's what a lot of young people tend to do, is come out thinking they're going to make six figures like their parents. That's a great point, that you have to start where you start, and you'll grow. But ultimately, it just takes time. So thanks for that awesome piece of advice.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you again. And it's still crazy to think that I'm actually on the podcast that gave me the courage to start thinking about leaving my firm.
Is bookkeeping a major pain point for you? If so, you're not alone. Many financial advisors hate bookkeeping. And guess what? They're often terrible at it too. Enter the Bean team at FA Bean Counters, powered by XY Planning Network. Their free chart of accounts template will help you tackle one of the most basic but often incorrectly done bookkeeping tasks. Visit fabeancounters.com/XYPNradio to download the template and learn how to set up your chart of accounts like a pro. Be sure to join our VIP community at xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to hang out with other XYPN Radio listeners, ask questions for future mailbag episodes with myself and Kitsis, and to finally find a community of like-minded financial advisors. Thanks so much for joining me today. We'll see you next time.
You're not alone, and you're not crazy. It's scary starting, building, and growing your own financial planning firm. And that's why we put together a free private community just for you, the Cutting Edge Financial Planner. Go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP or text XYPN Radio to 33344 and join a network of thousands ready to change the lives of Gen X and Gen Y clients.